Mary and I had such different personalities that from the minute that I came into the family, it was pretty rocky.
Hello everyone and welcome. We are continuing to talk about the book Becoming Sister Wives. We are in chapter 6, which is written by Janelle, and it is in part 2 of the book, and it focuses on sorority. Now, if you haven't listened to other videos, I would recommend going back and listening to the last chapter, which was written by Mary, because Janelle and Mary were having some conflict in those early years, and it seemed to really continue to have conflict, honestly, but Mary gave her perspective about it in her chapter. So this one is going to be Janelle's perspective. So you might like to hear both of them. I'm going to go ahead and put a link up here. You can also go to the playlist where I have all of the videos I've done about this book. But that is it. Let's get started. So much like Mary, Janelle says that she idealized what it was going to be like to be a sister wife and to be in a polygamous relationship. Now, the one thing that makes them different here is Mary grew up in a polygamous family, so she actually saw how it, all went down. Janelle, on the other hand, was looking from the outside. So she was really able to wear those rose-colored glasses when it came to becoming a polygamist. Another thing that sounds very similar when you've just finished Mary's chapter and you're starting Janelle's is Janelle says she thought her sister wife would be her best friend. So that's how she envisioned those relationships. She thought she was just going to have these best friends, and we know that is not how it ends up going down. Immediately on the first full page of Janelle's chapter, which is on page 113, I read a part of it that seemed to be either a discrepancy or just her and Mary do not agree on what happened in the past, which we know is something that occurs a lot in this family. But if you have the book, on page 91 in Mary's chapter, she says that they moved into a new house around the time of Janelle and Cody's wedding. And she wanted it to be, she says, I didn't want it to feel like my house, but our house. She decided to offer the master bedroom to Janelle, and she would take the small bedroom at the back of the house. Now she says she offered it, and she goes a little further and says, I didn't realize then that Janelle wasn't the type to speak up for what she needed. When you switch over to Janelle's chapter, and you're on page 113, she's talking about how she felt like she lived in their house. Like it didn't feel like her house. She says, I moved into the guest bedroom of his and Mary's home. In no time, I felt like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. So I don't know if I'm misunderstanding when they moved, or maybe one of them is talking about a different house than the other one. I don't know. Maybe she lived with them in their house briefly and then they moved later. I don't really know that it's that important, but I did feel like it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But aside from that part, there is some stuff they can't agree on, and that is that it was really rough those first few years. Janelle says that Mary was very overbearing, and she felt like she could do nothing right. This was something we heard about on the show.
I remember, it was like which laundry or which detergent should we use?
Yeah.
Should you put oranges in the fridge or not? There was everything. It was like everything.
So this issue comes up both in the book and on the show. Janelle says Mary had a problem with how she folded the laundry, what dish soaps she bought, how she put away the dishes. So they were really Mary was really just nitpicking when it came to what Janelle was doing. And Janelle is a people pleaser, and she avoids confrontation. And so that was sort of her reaction. She just started to avoid Mary. So Janelle is retreating and sort of staying in her bedroom as much as possible to avoid spending time with Mary and hearing what Mary has to say. Janelle says there was a lot of times she wanted to tell Mary off, but she stopped herself. She also makes a point of mentioning that this isn't uncommon in polygamous families. The first year can be really rough, but divorce was not an option for her. Now, sisterhood is the point of this chapter. This is in the part of the book called sorority. So we don't hear as much about Cody, but Janelle does say that because she jumped right into living with him and Mary, she feels like she didn't have time to connect with Cody. And when they were all together, it was like he didn't know how to be her husband. And she makes the point of saying that when they would watch a movie together, Cody and Mary would sit together on the couch, and she felt like she was on the outside. So she wasn't really, showing any physical affection with Cody, but Mary would. So she felt like she was on the outside. So this sort of explains more about why they have that rule of no physical affection in front of another sister wife. And that was mentioned in Mary's chapter as well. So Janelle says she begins to physically distance herself. At this point, Cody is working a job that is taking him out of the house from like 6 in the morning to like 10 o'clock at night. So that leaves a lot of time for Janelle and Mary to be stuck together alone. So Janelle can go to work during the day, but the problem is, what is she going to do after work? If she heads home, she's going to be stuck there alone with Mary. So Janelle has this goal of just trying to avoid Mary as much as possible, and she starts doing a lot of work on the ranch. She said she liked being outside, and this gave her her own sense of identity. And then when she did go home, she would spend as much time as possible in her bedroom. So things were really, really rough. I can't imagine that anyone wants to live like that. So to add fuel to the fire, Mary will sometimes go with Cody when he travels out of state for work. So Cody will have to go out of state, and Mary would take off from work to go travel with him. But Janelle didn't feel like she could do that. Well, actually, it says she couldn't do that. She didn't have a choice. But she also says it felt really flaky. That is the word she used. She felt like Mary shouldn't be blowing off work when they needed money. So she sort of resented that Mary felt like she could just not work and then go with Cody. Meanwhile, she's staying there and working. Janelle doesn't seem to look back too fondly on these years, not just because of the time she had with Mary, but also the time that Mary would leave. Mary would go off with Cody on one of his work trips, and then Janelle has a different set of feelings about that. She sort of resents that Mary leaves. I'm sure at some point she felt some sort of jealousy. She doesn't explicitly say that, but it would be hard not to feel a little bit jealous that another woman was going with your husband. But she also points out that she was in a small, unfamiliar town. Now, she's going out to the ranch, and I didn't mention that yet, but the ranch is Cody's dad's ranch. So she spends a lot of time there, and of course her mom lives there, but that was like the only person that she had to really lean on during those times. Now, one of the things I found interesting in this was that she says even though her mom and her would spend time together, they never really had in-depth conversations about the things going on in their relationships. They were both new to polygamy. They were both trying to transition to this new lifestyle, but it wasn't something they really discussed a lot. So I sort of wonder if it was something they avoided talking about because it was just going to make it feel worse. You know what I mean? Like if you have something sad happening and someone else does, and then you start talking about it and then it becomes almost too much and too emotional. I wonder if that is what stopped them from having any more in-depth conversations about it. Now you may be thinking, well, she could always pick up the phone and call a friend or call someone in her family. But Janelle says that when she left Utah and moved to Wyoming and married Cody, she lost a lot of her friends and family. Some of them were really very, very unhappy with her deciding to be a polygamist. She says her maternal grandfather never forgave her and never spoke to her again. And she even talks about a time she went back to visit them, and they cornered her and tried to tell her, how wrong it was and everything she was giving up. And they read Mormon scriptures to her. So she really gave up a lot of her friends and a lot of her family. And she also gave up her career. She said she had a stable job in Utah, but when she moved to Wyoming, it wasn't the same. Like the work opportunities weren't the same. And she felt like she had given up a lot of her career goals and she had been set back. So she has really given up a lot of herself to be there with Mary and Cody. And then she gets there and it is just a mess. It may seem like it's all been negative, and for the most part it sort of has been, but there is something good that happens. 6 months after marrying Cody, Janelle finds out that she's pregnant with Logan, and she is really excited. But, she does realize that Meri has not been able to get pregnant after 3 years of marriage to Cody. So she realizes there's some fertility issues. However, she says that things were so bad with Meri at that point, she didn't care how Meri felt. So I just want to stop and put in my opinion here. And of course, I want to know what you guys think. But, I've just read Meri's chapter. Now I'm on to Janelle's chapter, and it's clear they're miserable. Like, they're both unhappy for very different reasons, but this living situation is just not going well for them. Meri's open about the fact that she is outspoken and can be very assertive. And then Janelle talks about it, and it sounds like Meri can be downright mean and nagging. And they're both unhappy, just in different ways. That's my take on this. I wonder if Meri really felt like she had to practice polygamy, even though she says she didn't feel that way. I wonder if she did feel pressure, but maybe it wasn't something she realized. And then Janelle enters the picture, and she is angry, like really angry. I don't know. That's just my thinking, because what would make you want to make someone else miserable unless you didn't want him there, or unless you were really upset about the decision to have a new sister wife? Like, why would you do this? Like, what was the point of this? Maybe she didn't like Janelle, or maybe she was super angry about this being her ex-sister-in-law. I don't know. It just feels like there had to be something that made Meri want to make it such a bad experience for Janelle. Or I could be wrong about all of that, and Meri is really just a mean girl. I don't know. You guys can let me know down in the comments. Now, there is a story that definitely makes Meri sound like a mean girl, and it is a story that Janelle tells on page 117. Basically, Cody had taken a new job with a logging company. He was still traveling for work, and Meri, of course, would take off work and go with him. Well, things are different now because Janelle is pregnant, and she is a lot more emotional. So this is making her more upset than usual, and she's having a harder time just biting her lip and putting up with it. Now, to add to this, her and Meri are not getting along at all. Their relationship is very bad. And Janelle and her friend had decided to experiment with different makeup looks. So Janelle has her makeup done very differently. And then, when all of this is happening, when Cody and Meri are about to leave and Janelle is very upset, Meri goes over and starts ridiculing Janelle's makeup. Janelle said she couldn't take it anymore. She was about to have a mental breakdown. Like, it was too much. And so she started crying as Cody was about to leave. And she told him that, she just needs to know that she's loved. Like, she needs to know that he loves her too. It's not just Meri. She's not on the outside. And Cody said, "Of course I love you." And she said, "That's all I needed to hear." It's sort of a weird little story to me because it sounds awful, and it sounds like it should have led to some big thing that changed their relationship, and that's where it ends. It's like, he said, "I love you," and then it was like, oh, it's all great. It reminds me sort of a Full House episode where everything wraps up nicely at the end and it's all perfect. She basically says after hearing "I love you" that it was okay. She knew she was okay. Aside from that, my issue with this story is how mean it sounds. Why was Meri ridiculing someone's makeup? Anyway, even if they weren't upset, what's the point of that? And why would she do it to a pregnant woman when she's about to walk out the door on a trip with that woman's husband and leave the pregnant woman at home by herself? Like, it just feels really mean. So we're finally at the point where Christine is added into the family. She courts Cody and marries him when Janelle is pregnant with Logan. Janelle says that she didn't really have a lot of extra time to worry that much about Christine entering the picture because she was focused on the pregnancy, but she liked Christine. She was very bubbly and outgoing. Janelle thought it would be a good fit for the family, and she thought that Christine was going to come in and sort of take her out of the line of fire. Meri would have someone else that she could spend time with and focus on. And that's exactly what happens. Christine enters the family, and she sort of acts as a buffer. So that eases up some of the tension.
And everything that I did was a little bit like both of them. And so I really was this mediator for a long time.
Now, she doesn't move into the house with them. She has her own house that's nearby, so her and Cody can have some alone time. But she's still spending time with them, and she's specifically spending time with Meri. But you know the saying, three's a crowd? That's sort of what ends up happening. Christine and Meri start doing things together, and then they don't invite Janelle. And I'm not sure that it was intentional. There's nothing here in the book that says they were doing it on purpose or trying to be mean. It sounds like they just really connected, and there Janelle is with a little baby. They might have just thought she didn't want to go do what they were doing. You know, it might have not been intentional, but Janelle starts to feel really excluded. And she says that really bothers her. That's something she's very sensitive about. She goes as far as saying she really just wants the invite. It's possible she would have just stayed home with the baby, but she would have liked to have been invited. Now, I do want to point out something that she says about Christine. She says there weren't that many issues between them. For the most part, there was just some small stuff, and it was really no big deal. So she gets along with Christine from the beginning pretty well. You know, there were some small issues though. And the one thing she says is that Christine came off as a princess. She didn't think she needed to work to contribute to the family. Now, we know in the future when there's, more kids and the family is bigger, Christine's role is really important, but it sounds like Christine didn't want to work from the get-go. And that was one issue that Janelle had with Christine. But Janelle's not too hard on her. She actually makes the point of saying that Christine was naive and didn't have a lot of experience living away from her parents. So she just didn't have a lot of life experience, and she didn't probably understand a lot about the finances and, the importance of her contributing then at that time when she could. So I don't know. I think it's interesting. Janelle ends up with two women who aren't really career focused, and she is. And so I'm sure there were always some resentments when it came to that sort of stuff. I know we watched that on the show when Robin comes into the family and isn't going to be working.
And as things just were not very good at home with Mary, I just went to work. It was easier. I enjoyed it. It was an escape.
Janelle really separates herself from the other sister wives and stands out from them when it comes to her drive to have a career and focus on finances. Then she's got three sister wives that don't really do the same thing, at least in the beginning of these marriages. I feel like in the future, Mary's going to do really well with Lulu Rowe, but at the beginning, that just wasn't what it was like for them. I said that things turned around when Christine entered the picture, but things got even better when more children entered the picture. That was really a game changer for the relationships of these women. And Janelle talks very, very fondly about them having children and parenting them together. She said it brought them closer than ever. Janelle really trusted Mary and Christine with her kids, and she said she trusted them to make all of the parenting decisions that she would make. Like if the kids were sick, they could decide if they needed medicine. She knew that they were well taken care of. And this also helped her career. She was able to go into work early or late. She didn't worry about the groceries or if the kids were sick. She really could focus on their career and have basically two stay-at-home moms helping her. Janelle also talks about how it's good for her kids to have multiple people in their lives helping raise them, and that they get different experiences because of that. She says she's not good at baking or sewing, but Christine loves to cook and Mary loves to sew. So everything in the end ends up getting done. We can't forget Cody completely. Janelle says that they had a wonderful, functional relationship. It wasn't very romantic, but it was good. She makes the point of saying that about 5 years after Christine entered the family, Cody really matured. Like he was at a good place. She said he had always leaned to the elders of the church when it came to decision making, but about 5 years after marrying Christine, he was finally able to make decisions on his own. He was good at considering what everyone in the family wanted and needed, and he was just at a very good place, and he was finally more emotionally mature. Even though things are going good, that doesn't mean they're going perfect. They still are struggling with their finances. Their house is getting crowded. She had always lived with Mary or Christine. She had never had that alone time with Cody, so she was always trying to live with another sister wife. And there were just a lot of kids, and it just was a struggle, right? So around the 8th year of marriage, she gives birth to Gabriel, and she ends up also getting into a very, very bad fight with Mary. So this is after she's given birth to Gabe. She says she was very depressed. She was feeling very bad about their financial situation. Things were not looking that great. And so she gets into this fight with Mary. Janelle actually says it was one of the worst fights that she had ever had with Mary, and it just pushes her to her breaking point. She hops in her car and she leaves. She's there overnight, and then the next morning, Cody comes by to pick her up as they go and run some errands, and he basically looks at her and says, like, "Are you better now?" And the answer, of course, was no, she wasn't better, and she realized then that Cody just didn't understand how she felt. Janelle says most of the problems that she had with her family came from them all living together. And the truth was, Janelle didn't have to. She made enough money to live on her own, but not when she was contributing to the family. And that was something that she always did. She always shared with them because they all believed it was important that they lived together. She says in the book that a lot of people, a lot of polygamists look down on other polygamous families that don't live in one household. So they really all wanted to live together, but Janelle is done. She doesn't want to go back to living with them. So she lives with her mom for a while and then saves her money to get her own place. So she ends up moving into her own home, she buys a new car, and she really starts to make a life for herself and her kids. Now you may be thinking that she didn't want to be with Cody, but that isn't what it says here in the book. She says that she knew that they would always be connected. Like Cody was going to make sure it happened, even if it did mean they lived in separate homes. She said she didn't feel like she was leaving Cody or the family when she decided to get her own place. Now, while all of this is happening, Janelle decides to go back to school and get her degree in accounting. And she says this was huge for her. Like, this is something she really wanted to do. She says, "I felt personally and intellectually fulfilled." So this was really a good thing for her. Like, it may have came from something negative, but it really pushed her in a good direction. So she's living on her own. Cody is coming over and staying the nights there. And then during the day, she's driving the kids to Mary and Christine. She says it was always a priority that the kids were still close to their siblings. And she said on the weekends, they would all get together for family meals. For about 2 years, this situation actually seems to work out pretty well for them, at least according to Janelle. She says she loved managing her own household and doing things the way she wanted to do them. But then Cody comes to her and says that he is moving the family to Utah. You know, they've been living in Wyoming, so they're moving back to Utah. He won't have to travel anymore. He's going to be home with the kids every night. And for a year, that's what happens. She stays there in Wyoming and he is in Utah. But eventually she does start to miss the family. And then Cody tells her something that changes everything. He found a house that was lived in by another polygamous family. And they can move in there and each wife will have their own kitchen, their own living rooms, and their own bedrooms. There's space for everyone. They'll all be together, but they'll still be able to be apart when they need to. That's the big house they were living in when the show started, and Janelle says it really changed everything. So this is another change that really benefits the family. They're all going to be there together. The siblings will all be close, and Janelle's relationship with Cody gets even better. She says things got sweeter. She was more comfortable being vulnerable in front of him and letting him know how she felt about things. Yet she still had all of her own personal space. So she had a place to go when she may feel overwhelmed by the other sister wives or all of the children. It just really worked well for them. She also had matured and said that she no longer listened to what other people said about her. She didn't take the criticism from other people seriously. She didn't let other people tell her what to do or how to act. So she was now at a different place with Mary. Like, what Mary said wasn't going to get to Janelle. So everything's going good. Things are working out now, you know, for the most part. And then 16 years after Christine entered the family, Cody comes to Janelle and says he wants to start courting Robin. And let me tell you what, he must have done it in a really amazing way, because this is what she says about it. "I was fairly surprised when Cody came to me one afternoon and told me he was thinking about courting Robin, but the way he handled it left me in awe of his emotional growth." So she doesn't give details, but he must have done a pretty darn good job, because if someone came to me and said they were going to bring someone new into the family, first of all, I'm not a polygamist, so it would be no. But even if I was, like if I was her in that situation where things were finally going well and had calmed down, I would absolutely be resistant. But instead, she's impressed by his emotional growth. Janelle really does a good job of hyping Cody up during this part of the book. She's talking about him courting Robin, and she says that Cody has had emotional growth. He's more empathetic. He makes sure that Robin is protected and knows that she's important, but he also makes sure that the other wives know that they're important and the kids in the family know that they're important. Nothing's going to change. Cody's just doing amazing. And all I keep thinking is, isn't this the time or around the time where he takes the wedding ring of Mary's and melts it? Like, isn't this the same time period? So is he just like having emotional growth with her, or are we just not being real honest in the book? I wish they would have put that story in the book. Around the time that all this was taking place, Cody took the wedding ring he had with Mary and melted it. It really would have made us have an interesting twist in the book. But at this point, I feel like everyone's just hyping Cody up. Janelle says that around the time Cody was courting Robin, that was when they also decided to do the show. So there were a lot of changes, but she says she actually didn't have any issues with Robin entering the family. It all went really smoothly during that courting period, and it wasn't until afterwards that she began to struggle with having all of the change that had happened. One thing that is brought up is parenting styles. You know, Robin enters the picture as a mom with 3 kids, and she's already parenting a certain way, but then she has 3 other mothers and this whole group of kids. So like a big change for them was that Robin sent her kids to public school. They didn't. They homeschooled their kids. So when Robin enters the picture, all the kids go to public school. She says that Robin really coddles her children, but Christine, Mary, and Janelle never have done that with their kids. They don't really baby them, and we know that's true. We know that Robin does that. So there were some parenting differences that sort of changed things for the family and shook things up, and we know that's something they talk about. They say when Robin entered the picture, it really shifted things in the family. However, Janelle does point out some good stuff that happened from Robin entering the family, and one of them was that the family did a better job of working out things they disagreed on. Janelle says in the past it had been very, very chaotic. There'd be slammed doors, arguments and issues would go unresolved, but she says that Robin is really good about sitting down and talking things out and still being polite when she's upset or angry. So this was a positive thing that Robin brought to the table. However, with all that being said, it was still a big change for the family, and it really shook things up for Janelle. She says it just wasn't going that smoothly. It felt like they were wearing shoes on the wrong feet, and their rhythm was all disrupted. She says that Robin would often try to extend an olive branch by helping do something with the kids or picking up little just because gifts, but it didn't help. Like, Janelle was not reaching out to Robin the same way that Robin was reaching out to her. She said she had no issues with Robin entering the family. She just wasn't that emotionally connected to the situation and didn't want to put in the work that was needed to actually bond with Robin. But eventually she decided that it was in her best interest, in the family's best interest, and she really just broke down. She said she got tired of fighting against Robin and the potential friendship. So she gives in, and she says that she let Robin in. She says they have a long way to go, and at the time of writing this book, they're at the beginning of their journey. So they're learning to be closer and, you know, be good sister wives to each other. She does say a little bit more about her relationship with Cody. She said they're working on having more of an emotional, profound, caring relationship. That in the past it had been too much focused on finances and business, but they were working on having something deeper. It does end on a less than positive note. She basically says, you know, you can't pick your sisters. Sometimes you love them, sometimes you hate them. That's what it is. But I mean, I think that was as honest as they were probably comfortable being in the book. Of course, I think they left out a lot, and we've learned more and more. But that is it for Janelle. You guys, let me know what you think down in the comments. And if you haven't already, I hope you'll go ahead and click like and subscribe. The next chapters will be Christine and Robin talking about how they feel about their sister wives and those relationships.